Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here this morning. This is an important day and an important week for this legislation that will undoubtedly save lives. There's no question about that if it and when it does pass through the Senate Appropriations Committee. It's an honor to stand in front of this very august body of individuals, many of whom have either seen tragedy and death or have experienced and lived with it for many years, which is what we want to prevent the other families from having to suffer and struggle through the death and destruction that they've had to experience. Once every 2 minutes, a person is injured in a drunk driving crash in the United States. That's once every 2 minutes. Once every hour, someone dies from a drunk driver, every hour of every day. In California, each year, over 1,000 people die from drunk drivers and more than 20,000 are injured. Our current system of suspending someone's license and hoping that they don't drive drunk again just isn't working. Over half of DUI offenders drive illegally on suspended licenses after their arrest or don't complete their treatment programs. And repeat DUI offenders keep reoffending. They account for about 1/3 of annual DUI convictions. Technology exists to prevent DUI offenders from getting behind the wheel again and drinking and driving. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Transportation Safety Board recommend ignition interlock devices because in 25 states across the country, they've been shown to reduce recidivism by over 60%. Mothers Against Drunk Driving released a report finding that ignition interlock devices in California have prevented over 1 million, that's 1 million instances of drinking and driving since the state's pilot program began in 2010. It's time to expand the state's 4-county pilot program so all Californians can benefit from safer roadways. My legislation, Senate Bill 1046, will require all DUI offenders to install ignition interlock devices. 6 months for first-time offenders, 1 year for second offenses, 2 years for third offenses, and 3 years for a fourth or subsequent DUI. Now, the National Transportation Safety Board supports my legislation, saying research evaluation of ignition interlock programs over the last 2 decades has found that ignition interlock devices are effective in reducing recidivism among DUI offenders, sometimes by as much as 62 to 75%. SB 1064 significantly upgrades California's ignition interlock law by mandating devices for all offenders, providing Californians with another excellent step toward reducing crashes, injuries, and deaths involving alcohol-related drivers. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reviewed 15 studies on the effectiveness of ignition interlock devices at reducing DUI recidivism, concluding rearrest rates for alcohol-impaired driving decreased by a median of 67% relative to comparison groups. The CDC recommends ignition interlocks for everyone convicted of DWI, even for first offenders. Now, the National Transportation Highway Safety Administration released a report that found, quote, ignition interlocks, when appropriately used, prevent alcohol-impaired driving by DUI offenders, resulting in increased safety for all roadway users. Research has shown that while installed on an offender's vehicle, ignition interlocks reduce recidivism among both first-time and repeated DWI offenders. I call on my colleagues in the Senate Appropriations Committee to pass SB 1046 during Friday's suspense hearing. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce a couple of speakers. Our first one, Tom McGuire from the California Association of Highway Patrolmen. Tom?
Good morning, and thank you, Senator. It's an honor for me to stand in front of you. My name is Tom McGuire. I am the legislative chairman for the California Association of Highway Patrolmen. We represent the 13,000 plus retired and active members of the California Highway Patrol. As a 20-plus year veteran of the California Highway Patrol, I'm personally aware of the tragedy that occurs on the roadways, and we support any legislation that provides and increases public safety. Senate Bill 1046 will increase public safety by reducing collisions, reducing injury, and reducing death on the freeway, and that is critical legislation that we need to pass. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for your leadership and for being here this morning. Officer Brent Meyer from the Sacramento Police Department is here as well. And we really appreciate Officer Meyer, the Vice President of the Police Officers Research Association of California. Officer Meyer, thank you.
Thank you
very much.
As the Senator said, my name is Brent Meyer. I'm the Vice President of the Peace Officers Research Association of California, PORAC, and I have the great pleasure of standing here representing nearly 66,000 law enforcement peace officers in California. SB 1046 is long overdue to become a permanent program. In the 10 years that I've been a police officer here in Sacramento, I can tell you, working detection of impaired driving, this program would work and it would reduce the number of fatalities on our roadways. So we stand with Senator Hill in supporting this legislation and hope that the legislature acts quickly to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. And representing the town of Colma in my home county is Officer Kim Trask from the Colma Police Department. Officer, thank you.
My name is Officer Kim Trask, and I work for the Colma Police Department. I've been a police officer for approximately 4 years. In the past 4 years, I've had a strong interest in vehicle enforcement, mainly in the area of driving under the influence of both drug and alcohol related. In my short time as a peace officer, I've made numerous DUI arrests. Each circumstance and result of the context I've made, similar in that the person involved thought driving under the influence was acceptable. I've been shocked on how they were able to drive their vehicle in some of the cases. I've seen those who were incapable of standing without assistance who thought driving was a smart thing to do. Sadly, most of everyone arrested had a history of driving under the influence and may continue doing so even after they get arrested. Last October, I responded to a solo vehicle accident to the rear of our police department's back security gate. When I arrived, I found the vehicle approximately 80 feet inside our rear parking lot and saw a subject crawling out of the sunroof of the vehicle. The vehicle had been driven through our rear metal security gate and sustained major damage to the front and driver's side. Thankfully, the driver was not seriously injured and no one else was in the vehicle with him. The driver turned out to be almost 3 times over the legal limit. This incident goes to show the poor decisions people are still making when it comes to drinking and driving, and a reason that is important to me to do enforcement to keep our community safe. Law enforcement officers' dealings with intoxicated drivers are not limited to only making arrests. We are the ones who respond to those accidents where a driver has been drinking. We see firsthand the damage and injuries caused by drunk drivers, all based on poor decision making. This is something we cannot easily forget or move on from. Those visions stay with us. In 2014 and 2015, a combined total of 8 law enforcement officers were killed in a line of duty by drunk drivers. So far this year, 4 law enforcement officers have been killed. That number may seem small to some, but to fellow law enforcement officers, that number is huge. I joined MAD in support of SB 1046. I have seen repeat offenders who are on court probation or have a suspended driver's license due to a DUI arrest. It is very apparent that those restrictions do not matter to them. They continue to drive with ill regard to the safety of others. I believe ignition interlocks for all offenders is a tool that will save lives and stop drunk driving. I appreciate everyone involved in this process for making our communities and roadways safe. Safety and health are our #1 priority for those we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. And, Mothers Against Drunk Driving is such a powerful organization, and it is powerful because of the courageous volunteers that have worked so hard and continue to work every day to prevent drunk driving. And sadly, so many of them have been touched by the loss of loved ones and family members. Today we have those members, and as you can see by the vehicle in the trailer, those that have lost, and that's Carol and Chris Leister, have lost their son, Scott, to a drunk driver. Carol, would you like to say something?
Thank you. I'm standing here with my husband, Chris. Our son, Scott, a 21-year-old college student, had been living his dream by working towards earning a medical degree to provide international humanitarian aid. In high school, his passion for service had led him to plant trees in Vietnam to replace landmines. He built homes for Haitian refugees and a dormitory for orphans in the Dominican Republic, set up computer classrooms in Cuba, and he volunteered on service projects in Ecuador, Costa Rica, Belize, and Mexico. Just days before he died, he was helping to build a Habitat for Humanity home in the Bay Area. Scott's dream was thwarted when he was killed in a fiery crash on the San Francisco Bay Bridge at 2:20 a.m. on a Sunday morning, while on his way home from an evening with family and friends in San Francisco. We received that dreaded middle-of-the-night phone call that is every parent's worst nightmare. A 22-year-old man with a blood alcohol level over twice the legal limit crashed his car, estimated to be going over 110 miles an hour, into the back of our family Mercedes, where Scott was a rear seat passenger, sending both cars careening out of control across all lanes with such force that it broke the bridge's timing lights. This was the offender's first DUI arrest. First-time offenders, according to the Centers for Disease Control, first-time offenders have driven drunk over 80 times before their first arrest. We learned firsthand that first-time offenders can be deadly offenders. I'm sure you've noticed the Mad Crash Car trailer parked over there. It was brought here so you could see firsthand the impact a first-time drunk driver can have on its car and its passengers. You can see the point of impact where our son Scott took his last breath. We know that 50 to 75% of convicted drunk drivers continue to drive on a suspended license. We know that the interlocks, when installed, reduce drunk driving rearrests by 60%. Ignition interlocks prevent drivers from starting their vehicle when they are drunk. We urge the Senate Appropriations Committee to pass SB 1046, requiring ignition interlocks for all offenders. This will not only benefit the community by saving lives, it will also benefit convicted drunk driver offenders by allowing them to drive anywhere, anytime, as long as they are sober. As Scott's parents, it's our hope that passage of SB 1046 will save other families the heartache of losing a loved one to this 100% preventable crime of drunk driving. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Carol and Chris. It's interesting when we talk about why we're here today, why we have the vehicle there. So often you look at deaths, as I say, 1,000 are killed, or every 2 minutes. Those are statistics, those are numbers. But what that is real. That's personal, that's destruction, and those are lives that have been destroyed by drunk driving. So I'd like to now introduce Angel Martinez, whose life and family was devastated by a drunk driver. Angel, thank you.
My name is Angel Martinez. Esperanza and Yulidia was my sister-in-law and my niece. My niece only has 1 year when she got killed, and her mother was 46 years old. They was just taking a walk when a drunk driver came from out of nowhere and run them over. And my family has been in struggle since a year, and it's been a tough year for us. No family should have to enter this. No one should have to ask why our laws didn't protect a family member from a convicted drunk driver. who made the disastrous decision to drive drunk again. We need to talk about solutions so this crime doesn't hurt anyone else. Ignition interlocks are a way to stop someone from driving drunk. Every drunk driver should be required to use ignition interlocks, not a second offenders or third offenders, all of them. Esperanza and Yuridia weren't given a second chance when they were killed by a drunk driver. Drunk driving isn't an accident. It's not a mistake. It is a decision to take someone else's life in your hands. I stand here today as representative of my family and all the victims and their families who have suffered at the hands of the drunk driver. We ask the Senate Appropriations Committee to please pass SB 1046. Please pass this legislation for the victims we lost and for the thousands of lives that will be saved by ignition interlocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel, very much. As you can see, it's not just a statistic, it's not just a number. Those are lives, those are people, those are families, those are generations that have been lost. Be happy to take any questions that you might have. Any questions? Very good. Thank you very much, and thank you to the volunteers of MAD and for our law enforcement support and for their commitment to safe streets and safe roads in California. Thank you very much for being here today.